Hi, I'm Dee. I'm the founder of Mint on Demand. I'm joined again today by Zoe. Zoe's a nutritional therapist who specialises in hormones, and we thought it would be interesting to have a chat about hormones, what they are, and how they can affect our general health and well-being. When we got talking, we realised that actually there's a lot to cover, especially when it comes to male hormones. So we've decided to start off with a basic introduction and include that as part of a 4-part series where we go into a bit more depth regarding hair loss, diet, weight gain, and also sex drive. So we'll be talking about those in further detail over the coming weeks.
I think the first chat that we're going to have is going to be very much about sort of basics about hormones. And we're going to be talking, of course, about symptoms and all the things that you can sort of recognize if you have a hormone imbalance. But just as a little caveat here, we can often be wrong, very wrong, about some of our symptoms. So if you feel after listening to any of these videos that you have these symptoms, then the most important thing is to hop along to your GP and get thoroughly tested for all of the hormones so that you don't A, make assumptions, B, start to self-medicate, which I do see a lot of people doing and can lead to a lot of problems down the line. So that is a definite caveat I'd say at the beginning.
So I guess my first question is, what actually is a hormone? Because I think when a lot of people think of hormones, we naturally think of hormones related to women. So puberty, childbirth, menopause. So it'd be good for you to explain exactly what a hormone is.
Yeah, I think you're very right there, Dee. Well, hormones are basically just chemical communications for all of our glands throughout the body. And they have a profound effect on not just what we tend to think of sex hormones, I think, when we talk of hormones. So like you rightfully say, we think of women's problems, PMT, menopause, childbirth and that kind of thing, but actually our hormones affect so many profound things like our mood, our appetite, weight gain, energy levels, sex drive, hair loss or gain. You know, almost every single bodily function you can think of is in some way impacted by our hormones. So all of the hormones in our body, they have to be balanced and they have to be optimal. So sometimes you can have a symptom and you pop along to your doctor and you think, oh, it's my thyroid because I've got no energy and I'm this and I'm that. And they come back and the test results, well, you're fine. But you're still symptomatic. You're like, well, no, I feel terrible. I have no energy. I have this, I have that. So A, it's important to not make an assumption, but sometimes when we go to the doctor and they give you a sort of general range of what's normal, that may not be optimal for our bodies. So we may still be symptomatic. So it's important that we listen to our bodies and we go back to our GP if we're not happy, satisfied, but we're still not feeling as good as we could be. So for example, one of the things that I suppose one of the hormones that gets out of balance really easily, and we call this, it's not a master hormone, but it can control all the other hormones, and that is cortisol. And we hear a lot about that because we know that stress raises our cortisol levels. But the impact of that prolonged stress and having that prolonged hormone raised is that in men it will automatically lower testosterone, and in women it will automatically lower their progesterone, so they can become what's called estrogen dominant. Right. And then also that raised stress, so more cortisol, lower thyroid in general. So all of these hormones kind of interplay with each other. So yeah, it can all start going all a bit messy. And then of course cortisol then affects the blood pressure and it affects your cholesterol levels. And so the cascade kind of goes on if we're imbalanced in any one area. So I say to everybody, work on your stress, work on your sleep. It was what we said on our very first video together. Obviously nutrition is important too, but we need to work on all of the lifestyle factors that play into keeping our hormones as balanced as they can be.
I guess women are just much more open to talking about hormones. And I think in general, there's a misconception that hormones don't really apply to men, or they just don't really exist, I guess.
And I think perhaps because women get more of obviously a monthly cycle of ebb and flow of certain hormones, and men less of that, they don't put their symptoms that they then get during middle age down to hormones. They think, oh, I've just suddenly put on this weight around my stomach and I'm losing my hair and I don't seem to have the motivation that I had, and maybe I'm not sexually as active. And so, but they don't necessarily equate that with an ebb and flow or a lowering of hormone. I think it's just not so much at the forefront of their mind. And then if they get diabetes and cardiovascular disease, again, they're not thinking, oh, there's a hormone related reason. Perhaps it's not the only reason, but it can impact those more acute and chronic diseases as well.
So you made reference to these glands. So can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah, we've got glands throughout our body, and they all have different functions. So if we start at the top, the hypothalamus in the brain, that is probably the master controller of our brain hormones. So it's a very, very important controller, and it does have ramifications and effects on our other hormones, and we'll perhaps talk about a little bit about that in a minute. Then we have a pituitary gland, and that signals our sex and our other hormone production, and that's the master controller of our body hormones. So the hypothalamus, pituitary, very, very important hormones, and they affect things like our hunger, our sleep, our wakefulness, our body temperature, and then just general sex hormone production as well. We then have a thyroid gland which sits around here, and that helps and controls our energy and our metabolism. We have a thymus gland which sort of is around here somewhere, and that is very important to our immune function. We then have our pancreas, which obviously releases insulin, which controls our glucose metabolism. And people don't think of insulin as a hormone. You know, a lot of people think, oh, I've got diabetes, and they don't think that's a hormone problem. So, you know, again, these things, we're not thinking hormones necessarily. And then we have the testes in men, obviously sex hormone production of testosterone, androgens, etc. And then we have the ovaries in women, who that's obviously where we produce our estrogen, progesterone during, before we're menopausal. And then obviously after we're menopausal, the adrenals take up, and our fat tissues take up that estrogen production. But during our fertile years, that's obviously concentrated in the ovaries. And then we've got our adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, and they are very important for sex hormone production, for anti-inflammatory hormones. So cortisol is actually, as well as a stress hormone, is actually an anti-inflammatory hormone, because we go out and we're fighting and then we get injured. It's the cortisol actually that stops that injury. So a little bit of cortisol over a short period of time is extremely beneficial to the body.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing, and we need it. We need it desperately. And in fact, if we have cortisol, is so vital to us that if we have a condition called Addison's disease, which is extremely rare, where we do not produce cortisol, that is a life-threatening emergency condition. Cortisol is so vital to our well-being. So those are our main glands.
Okay, great. So what affects hormone production?
Yeah, that's quite a complex thing. Hormones are actually sent and they're received, and they transmit back to the gland in a kind of circuit. We call that a sort of feedback loop, if you like. So if there's any problem along this pathway, hormones can either go too high or they can go too low. So you've probably heard of something like hyperthyroidism, and hyper meaning we're producing too much thyroid hormone, and then hypothyroid, where we're not producing enough. So in a healthy person, what happens is we get a little signal, it's called a thyroid stimulating hormone. That gets sent out, it goes to our active hormone, and it looks if we've got enough circulating in our body. And if we haven't, if that level's too low, it knows from a feedback mechanism, need to produce more. So generally hormones work on what we call a negative feedback loop. So levels go too low, they know to raise the production. Okay, that isn't the same for everything, and breastfeeding is a different one where there's a positive feedback loop. So, you know, obviously the more you breastfeed, the more milk you produce, and that's more like a positive feedback. But it's probably one of the few positive feedbacks. Most work on a negative. So generally speaking, that's how we stay in balance. But of course, then there's lots of things that can disrupt that pathway, and so they start not working adequately. So generally speaking, I think we'd say with most hormones, it's a bit like everything in life. Too little is bad, too much is bad, and we want to be kind of somewhere in that bell curve, somewhere in the middle.
So balancing them.
So having balance is always a good thing. Yeah.
So this might seem like an obvious question, but how would you know if you have a hormone problem?
Right, okay. Well, if there's a problem in that communication and production that we talked about, you will almost certainly have symptoms of deficiency or excess, depending what the hormone is that's deficient or it producing excess. You'll have obviously a different set of symptoms. So, for example, if you look at the thyroid, this controls our energy and our metabolism. So if the thyroid is too low, you'll have a propensity to gain weight, you will feel cold, you may feel depressed, your skin may be dry, you're going to feel chronically probably fatigued. So that's a very, you know, and that isn't the same when we talked about symptoms. That is not the only reason for fatigue. So don't absolutely assume, oh, I'm fatigued, I've got a thyroid problem, but it's something to rule out if that is your major symptom. Now, similarly, if our thyroid hormone was too high, then because this controls our metabolism, it's like being on speed. We'd have a racing mind and quite often heart palpitations, you know, not able to calm down and settle because our metabolism is being constantly, it's like a racing car where the engine's, you know, set too high. We potentially would lose weight and feel extremely agitated. So quite often the temptation is, with any hormone, to recognize that you have an issue and then supplement that hormone into the body. Okay, I'm deficient in adrenals, so I'm going to take adrenal glands, or I'm deficient in thyroid hormone, so I'm going to take the thyroid hormone. And sometimes, you know, of course, that is necessary. But as we discussed about how hormones become imbalanced, we might have that thyroid imbalance because we've been way too stressed out. We've got way too much cortisol, and that has artificially pushed our thyroid down. So we don't want to medicate the thyroid. We want to alleviate the stress and see if that all comes back into balance, because quite often it does. The same with our progesterone production. If our progesterone is low, and this happens to a lot of women where we become sort of imbalanced with too much estrogen, again, the temptation is to go and slap a load of progesterone cream. But we need to establish, well, is that a genuine lack of progesterone, or is that caused, again, too much stress affected the progesterone production, and it's actually the stress we need to work on. So it's a complex thing, and it's not easy just to suddenly assume that you need a kind of supplementation that's going to fix it.
Is there something that happens with men, say, when they enter a certain age? Because obviously with men, they don't have monthly cycles. They go through puberty, then they go into adulthood. But there must be something that happens at a certain age where, you know, sometimes the stress can affect certain hormone production?
Yeah, for sure.
40s, 50s?
Absolutely. You know, men are, you know, lots of people discuss the andropause or the menopause, as they call it. Yeah, I mean, on the whole, you would say that testosterone production goes down a little bit naturally with age. And again, there can be many reasons for that. It's influenced by if you are not metabolically sound. So if you also have diabetes, too much insulin, then this will lower naturally our testosterone production. Again, we talk cortisol because that kind of affects everything. Cortisol too high, testosterone will naturally go down. And we gain as we get older. And also something called our natural human growth hormone goes down as we age as well. And that contributes to our lean body mass. So there's a kind of this horrible situation where we're losing our hormones that make us slim, and you know what I mean, the sort of hormones that keep us metabolically sound. And there's much more of a propensity to raise hormones that are going to make us gain weight, lose our sex hormones.
Okay.
And then sort of, yes, so absolutely.
So that is a natural progression as we get older.
It's a bit of a natural progression, but if you, again, if you eat well, if you maintain your stress, if you you know, exercise, even move a lot, you know, you don't have to be thrashing it out at the gym every day.
Yeah.
All of those things will, and we keep our insulin low by eating, you know, not too much refined carbohydrate diet, then this will keep our testosterone where it should be for our age, rather than feeling it's dropping down completely and oh my God, what do I do? I'm panicking, I'll go supplement.
So there is a way to balance it.
Absolutely.
Naturally.
In most people. A bit like in women, you can have women who have ovarian failure and don't produce estrogen, and the same in men. You can have more of a failure of the testes to produce testosterone. That's called more of a primary testosterone loss, and that's a medical thing to be evaluated. But for most men, it's a sort of gradual lowering of testosterone that can be mitigated by good lifestyle.
So if somebody was to supplement their hormones, is there any downside to doing that?
Yes, there's a considerable downside to supplementing with hormone. Let me say, first of all, sometimes it's absolutely necessary. So if you have, we discussed about Addison's disease, where you have no cortisol and you will die if you don't take a replacement cortisol. The same with the thyroid. You know, some people have to have surgery on the thyroid, they lose the thyroid gland, and they have to obviously automatically replace that hormone with a synthetic hormone, and they have no choice. A lot of men, particularly men, are very, very tempted to supplement testosterone if they're going to the gym and they're pumping the iron and they want to gain more, you know, pecs or whatever it is. They're very tempted to supplement their testosterone, and also growth hormone. And these are two very, very, let's put it this way, they should be done under extreme medical guidance, because as soon as you supplement a hormone, synthetic or otherwise, it doesn't matter if it's bioidentical, your natural production of that hormone will go down. And that's because that feedback loop we were talking about. So your body is looking all the time. Has your body got enough testosterone? Has your body got enough thyroid hormone? And if you're taking it, your body's going to go, yeah, okay, don't need to produce my own.
Yeah.
The natural production will go down. And this can be a very dangerous thing, particularly with things like growth hormone, because men, I've heard of men injecting themselves with growth hormone and they have to stay on it for life.
Right. Because their body stopped producing.
Their own natural production has gone. And A, it's very expensive, and B, it can be extremely dangerous if not done properly. And, you know, sort of calibrated to exactly your requirements. So yeah, there's a lot of danger to supplementing any hormone. It doesn't matter whether it's HRT, whatever it is, you need to take medical advice, take expert opinion, and titrate your hormone to exactly what you need and no more.
So go and see a hormone specialist, get tested first.
Absolutely. First of all, ask the question, is this a genuine deficiency? Or is this my body that's gone out of sync because I've not paid attention to my diet and lifestyle? So correct those factors first. If you're still incredibly symptomatic, nobody wants to suffer, then go and see a specialist who's not going to be pushing hormones on you, who really understands, yeah, you've tried everything, you're still feeling terrible. In your case, let's look to supplement exactly what you need. Yeah.
So are you able to tell us a little bit more about what substance makes hormones?
Yeah, definitely. I think people are often surprised to learn that all of our steroid hormones, so especially our sex hormones, testosterone, androgens, estrogen, progesterone, there is one raw material that all of this comes from, and that is cholesterol.
Really?
So, yeah, in the hormonal cascade, at the very, very top is cholesterol.
Oh, okay.
No cholesterol, we have no hormones.
Oh, wow.
And this can be very challenging, of course, for because lots and lots of people taking statin medication, and obviously that's a question that you must ask your GP. Is it obviously some people need to take a statin. The problem with lowering cholesterol too much is that you will then lose your sex hormones, and this happens a lot in men. You will find that all of a sudden, if it lowers too much, then they've got no sex drive, or they are actually unable to perform sexually. And also they get a lot of people complain about incredible muscle aches too on statin drugs, because again, a lot of your hormones are anti-inflammatory. You know, estrogen is anti-inflammatory. Cortisol is anti-inflammatory. Progesterone has its sort of effects in calming the body as well. So we can feel really terrible if we take too many drugs that suppress our cholesterol, because this is the mother hormone. So you have your cholesterol, you have pregnenolone, which is your next tier, cascade of hormone. And from that, we make, on the one hand, through another hormone, we make testosterone. And then on the women, we make progesterone, we make estradiol, and so on. So yeah, it all comes from cholesterol. So, and cholesterol is in every cell of the body. So it's vital. It's also vital that it's healthy cholesterol. So that's another topic we can talk about. But we need to have good ratios of cholesterol. It needs to be healthy, not oxidized. And generally, if you're having a good lifestyle, good diet, exercising well, sleeping well, your cholesterol, whatever the numbers are, will be healthy cholesterol.
Okay. So we seem to hear quite a lot about hormone problems and dysfunctions at this point in time. Are you able to shed any light on where that comes from and what drives that?
Yes, well, hormones are very, very sensitive to everything. Very sensitive, particularly to our environment. Very sensitive to chronic stress. And that can come from many areas. It can be a physical stress. It can be an emotional stress. You know, we've been living with somebody that is causing us problems. Our kids are going mad. You know, we've got that kind of emotional stress to deal with. And we've got more environmental stress than we've probably ever had to deal with. We've got thousands and thousands of chemicals now going into our environment. It's really scary when you see some statistics looking at the placenta, the blood placenta of babies that have just been born, and you see when they look at the toxicity of some of the chemicals in that placenta. It's terrifying when you think, you know, that's a newborn baby that's not really been exposed to all the things that we've been exposed to. And all of these influence our hormone production. A lot of them are called what we call xenoestrogens. So they falsely mimic estrogen. So a lot of our, pesticides and some of the chemicals that we clean with, they actually become a type of estrogen in the body. But unlike a natural estrogen that we produce, these xenoestrogens, as we call them, which is opposed to a phytoestrogen, which we get from our food, from plant sources, these xenoestrogens stay a lot longer on our estrogen receptors. So throughout our body, we have receptor sites for every hormone. And this is where, obviously, the interplay happens. But these disrupt these receptors. They stay on the receptors so that the good estrogens that we need can't get onto them. So they become, very challenging to get rid of, and extremely disruptive to our overall hormone imbalance. So it's a very, very big challenge because we can't really escape them. I mean, unless we live in a bubble.
Are you talking about products that we potentially put on our skin as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything. Makeup. I mean, there's just so many chemicals that, I mean, when I look at the way some women, they put 30 or 40 chemicals on their body, face and hair every single day.
Wow.
Really, they are not organic, they are not natural, the body has no clue what to do with them. And what the body, you have to think, your skin's the biggest, one of the biggest areas of absorbing products, directly into the bloodstream. And, it's a huge surface area. And we're really taking on board a lot of things that eventually we've got to get out. Now, if the body doesn't know how to detoxify them, what does it do? It stores them. It has no other choice. The body's very clever. It wants to keep you alive. So it will store everything in the fat cells, which is why the fat cells can become so toxic. And when we talk about weight gain in a little bit, this is another reason for major weight gain. We have all these toxins that we cannot detoxify. The body's trying to protect you. It's making you gain weight, but it's actually trying to preserve you from these toxins getting to your glands and your organs and everything else. So we're under a sort of chemical assault, if you like, every day. And I used to think, oh, this is ridiculous when I was younger. I used to read these books thinking, this is crazy. This can't be right. But
I mean, I've done a little bit of research even into natural and organic products, and I think they're quite misleading as well, because just having natural organic on a label doesn't really protect you from the fact that it might have all sorts of other chemicals lurking. So it's really just about reading those ingredients and looking into those.
It's kind of like, because it's natural, it doesn't have any impact. For example, lavender. We know that lavender has an estrogenic effect on the body. In a woman, that could be bad, depending on how well you detoxify your estrogen. In a man, and I've seen babies, male babies with gynecomastia, because they've been using lavender in baby products.
Oh, wow.
So we forget, just because it's grown in the garden, that everything is going to be good for us.
Yeah, well, this is the first time I've heard this, so it's about doing the research, isn't it, and reading the labelling.
And I won't mention them, but one of the leading companies, I think, that produce baby oil, that had lavender baby oil, have obviously now withdrawn it from the market. Because, again, it's like this misconception that comes out the garden, it's going to be okay.
So this all plays into hormone imbalance and dysfunction and all those sorts of problems.
Yeah, exactly. You have to understand that just because it's a herb and natural doesn't mean it doesn't have ramifications on, herbs are very powerful. To think a herb isn't like a drug is very misleading, and that's why it's a whole. I don't particularly know an awful lot about the ins and outs of every single herb, but because it's an area in itself to really understand if you're trying to help somebody combat an illness or a condition, because these are very powerful things, and you can get a bit
to be aware of what you're using and what effects that has on you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you Zoe for taking us through the basics of hormones. That was really, really informative. So with the next session, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how diet can influence hormone production. We'll also be talking about the two major hormones, if they're in or out of whack, how they can affect our bodies. And we'll also be talking about men with too much estrogen in their bodies and how that can make an impact as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I think just interjecting there, I think men tend to think of estrogen as a female hormone and only a female hormone, whereas men produce testosterone mainly, of course, and estrogen. But there are many lifestyle factors that can ramp up that estrogen production, including converting their own testosterone to estrogen.
If you want to follow Zoe on YouTube or Facebook, her handle is at Zoe-Holistic Health. And if you'd like to follow us, ours is at Mint on Demand. Thanks for watching.